Do you have the gift of gab and like talking about interesting topics? Are you often called opinionated by your friends and family? Then come to Anchor, where you can be all of the above and get paid for it. Along with being one of the easiest systems to create contact with, Anchor supplies everything you need and can be used from your smartphone or computer. They even distribute your content for you so that you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Just download the Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Okay, hello Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, and you are listening to 31 Days of Global Feminism. So today I am going to, I won't say sidetrack a little, but maybe I want to call it a sidetrack, because today I'm going out of what I call the Whoopi Chronicles. So Whoopi's back at work now, thank God. But there for a minute, Whoopi was suspended because of some remarks that she made concerning the Holocaust. And so I want to go into that. Let me see here. So let's go. Let me see here. I'm trying to find. Okay, so on January 31st, 2022, Whoopi drew widespread criticism for stating on the show, The View, where she is now, that the Holocaust was not based on race, but on man's inhumanity to man, telling her co-host that this is white people doing it to white people, so y'all going to fight amongst yourselves. She apologized on Twitter later that day. She maintained that the Nazis' issues was with ethnicity and not race, later on the late night show with Stephen Colbert. That same day, which drew even further criticism. Whoopi issued another apology on air the following day. She was subsequently suspended from The View for 2 weeks over the comments in return in February of 2020. So when I first heard that she said it wasn't about race, I was kind of like, okay, Whoopi. This is another time where I'm going to have to disagree with you, honey, because the Holocaust was about race. And then I realized when she said the rest of her statement, and I said, okay, actually she's not, even though she is wrong, how can I say this? She is not altogether wrong. She is not 100% wrong, because issues of racism tend to be about man's inhumanity to man. So she wasn't 100% wrong, but I'm going to do a little something here, because I think what she said had everything to do with the misunderstanding about what constitutes race. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a deep dive here and discuss, because me and my mother were having the same discussion, and I was saying, well, okay, in this country, Jews are a religion, but actually they are both. And so my mother was like, but they're a religion, they're not a race. And I said, okay, no, they are actually both. They are actually both. They are an ethnicity. They are an ethnicity, because as far as race goes, we are all of the human race. So they are a different ethnicity than the Germans, but they also are a practicing religion. So they're a little bit of both. So I was drawing my knowledge from my knowledge of the Old Testament, because as I said before, keep in mind that they were considered to be out of the bowels of Abraham. So they acknowledge Abraham as their forefather, who they descended out of, and they are what they are biblically based on a promise that God made it with Abraham, or a covenant. So they are a race as far as, well, let me go ahead and get more into it. And I'm recording this on March 7th, 2022. As I'm talking to you, I forgot to mention I did a live earlier this morning, and I mentioned a whole lot of stuff. I forgot to mention to keep Morris Day of the Time lifted up in your prayers, because right now he and the Prince estate are kind of going through a bit of a legal battle. So the Prince estate, I was just talking about that last night, and I said with some of these record companies, you have to watch what you're signing, because if you did not, which I'm just like, since Prince has passed away, why not just let them have that name so that they can work? You know what I'm saying? What can you do with their name? You can't do nothing with it. You know, it would be a different story if Prince was alive and this was his battle, and he wanted to decide to be petty with Morris and the rest of the time and act a fool, because, you know, he was instrumental in them being the time. They were kind of his and Morris's creation together. If you know the story, if I'm hearing remember the story correctly, this was something that they did together. So I could kind of see Prince himself having this battle with Morris, but it is not. It's the Prince estate that are trying to give Morris, interfere with Morris's legal duty to use the name Morris Day and the Time for them to perform and like tour and everything. And you know, they initially were just the Time in the early days, because I remember seeing them when they first came out. One of my first concerts, as a matter of fact, my first concert seeing Prince live here in Columbus, they were like the opening act, and so they were just the Time. And like I said, through reading and everything else, because Right On Magazine and different other magazines, you know, they were a Prince group, you know, as far as, you know, who was producing them and different little stuff like that. And so I remember looking earlier, and they were talking about, you know, someone was talking about the Jackson family. And, you know, if you're a Jackson fan, you remember that they were the Jackson 5 at first. And then when they decided to leave Motown and they went to Epic, they became the Jacksons. And so I said, with some of these record companies anymore, you could have come up with the name, but if they decide they want to claim it and they put it in their paperwork and decide that they want to not let you use it to work anymore, Tina Turner kind of went through the same battle with her ex-husband Ike Turner when she was divorcing him. He wanted to mess with her about using her working name, which was Tina Turner, because her real name is Ann Bullock. So Tina Turner is not her actual birth name, and he wanted to act a fool with that. And the judge kind of had to tell him, she's entitled to not just her working name. She was married to you for all these years in an environment that you made hostile. Most women that are married to a man, as long as she was married to him, when they divorced, would have been entitled to more than just her working name. She would have been entitled to half of his stuff and all of that other stuff. And abusive husbands, abusive exes being what they are, I think the only reason she wanted to be able to keep her name to work with it, because the record buying company already knows her as Tina Turner, and it would make it easier for her to work. But he really basically was going to battle her over the name we know her by, because as far as he was concerned, he owned the name because it was a name he gave her. I know, right? So when you're out here, because I'm doing music myself, so when you're out here and you get together with these studios and you get together with these image consultants and with these record companies, you want to make sure, and how many of us have watched Unsung, have watched Unsung, and have watched Behind the Music, and saw artists and companies be into it over the name. Prince relinquished his own name for a minute and became the artist formerly known as Prince. So as Morris and the Time go through what they're going through, let's keep them lifted up in prayer. If you have words of encouragement to give to Morris or anybody else from the Time that you are currently following on, I think it sucks. I think, if we were going to have to have a battle over the name, I'd rather he be battling with Prince while Prince is alive. But Prince is gone. It isn't even Prince that's giving him problems. It's the estate. And all I can think of, it would be easier for him to have the name so that he can continue to work and perform with this band that the public already knows and loves. And what is the estate gonna do with this name? You ain't gonna do nothing with this name. You ain't got nothing to do with this name. You just want to have some mess. You could have went ahead on and relinquished that name, unless Prince stated in his will that he specifically did not wanted to retain ownership of that name and whatever else. They may as well just go on and let them have that name. So people can come with you over some dumb stuff. So anyway, back to the Whoopi Chronicles. So the Whoopi Chronicles, we're going to go into the whole issue of race. So what is race? How is race defined? So race is a categorization of humans based on shared physical or social qualities into groups generally viewed as distinct within a given society. The term was first used to refer to speakers of a common language, then to denote national affiliations. By the 17th century, the term began to refer to physical or phenotypical traits. Modern science regards race as a social construct, an identity which is assigned based on rules made by society. while particularly based on physical. Let me go ahead and open this up. While based on physical similarities within groups, race does not always have an inherent physical or biological meaning. Social conceptions and groupings of races have varied over years, often involving folk taxonomies that define essential types of individuals based on perceived traits. Today, scientists consider such biological essentialism obsolete and generally discourage racial explanations for collective differentiation in both physical and behavioral traits. Even though there is a broad scientific agreement that essential and typical and typological concepts of race are untenable, scientists around the world continue to conceptualize race in widely differing ways. While some researchers continue to use the concept of race to make distinctions along fuzzy sets of traits or observable differences in behaviors, others in the scientific community suggest that the idea of race is inherently naive or simplistic. Still others argue amongst humans, race has no taxonomical significance because all human beings belong to the same subspecies, Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens is the scientific Homo sapiens as a subspecies. Is basically the technical or scientific name for human beings. Since the first half of the 20th century, the association of race with the discredited theories of scientific racism has contributed to race becoming seen as a large pseudo-scientific system of classification. Although still used in general context, race has often been replaced by less ambiguous and loaded terms: populations, peoples, ethnic groups, or communities, depending on context. So modern scholarship views racial categories as socially constructed, and I kind of do agree. And I base it on the fact that we're able to produce together, like marrying someone of a different ethnicity, getting together with them sexually, and having children with that person. Like, being of a different ethnicity doesn't stop that from being able to happen. No matter who you marry, you're able to produce children with them. So modern scholarship views racial categories as socially constructed. That is, race is not intrinsic to human beings, but rather an identity created often by socially dominant groups to establish meaning in a social content. Different cultures define different racial groups, often focused on the largest groups of social relevance, and those definitions can change over time. In South Africa, the Population Registration Act recognized only white, black, and colored, with Indians added later. The government of Myanmar recognizes 8 major national ethnic races. So I'm going to go ahead . And so these 8 groups are Bamar, Chin, Kachin, Karen, Kaya, Mon, Rankine, and Shan. The Brazilian census classifies people into brancos, which are white, pardos, which are multiracial, pretos, which are black, amarelos, which are Asian, and indigenous. Now you can read more about this under race and ethnicity in Brazil. Now this is all through Wikipedia. The United States Census Bureau proposed but then withdrew plans to add a new category to classify Middle Eastern and North African peoples in the U.S. Census 2020 over dispute over how this classification would be considered a white or a separate race, white ethnicity or a separate race. Legal definitions of whiteness in the United States used before the Civil Rights Movement were often challenged for specific groups. Historical race concepts have included a wide variety of schemes to divide local or worldwide populations into races or sub races. That's that, because I have a lot more to cover with this. So I'm going to go ahead and but this is the beginning, and like I said, all information that I'm reading is coming out of Wikipedia. So if you want to go and do the rabbit trail and do a little bit more, you can be my guest. So we've gotten through race. So how is race different from ethnicity and culture? And I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. So this is out of the World Atlas. The concepts of race, ethnicity, and culture fall into a complex discussion about humanity. All three of them are important for every society and play a major role in the development of the identities of all people. Their interaction is an important part of our reality, and is basically a large part of what forms it. People are usually not aware of how important race and ethnicity are for all aspects of their lives. Of course, there are many other factors that play a role here, but these are as big as any other. People may be looked upon differently because of their race or ethnicity, or different expectations may be placed on them. This can be positive or negative, but more often than not, it is the latter, negative. So race and ethnicity. To understand race, ethnicity, and culture, it is important to know how different they are from one another. Race is usually defined by our physical attributes, or, of course, there are other things that tie to it, like culture and behavior. More often than not, it is the color of the skin. I would almost say the texture of the hair as well. Ethnicity, on the other hand, is a state of belonging to a specific nation or culture. It is defined as a social group. Of course, these social groups are humongous since we're talking about nations. So there you have it. Race is more about is in our biology. It is something we are born with, while our ethnicity is defined by other things. Place of birth, the culture we belong to, and many others. It is something that we acquire throughout our lives. Culture is similar to ethnicity, but is more complex. Culture is an extremely broad term that encompasses many things. It is used every day by people in different contexts, and none of these are wrong. When speaking of culture, we can actually speak of an extremely diverse range of things. It is a concept that is difficult to define. The importance of culture. Culture often encompasses various different forms of social behavior and norms that can be found in our societies. Many things fall under a culture. including the arts, beliefs, knowledge, and habits of people that are in the groups that practice a specific culture. Religion is also an important part of a culture, but it helps to shape it. Given the complexity and variety of all things that can fall under the umbrella of culture, it is easy to see how broad the definition is. However, despite it being a grandiose term, it is still a term that does not cover the scope that the terms race and ethnicity do. Both race and ethnicity are much broader, and each culture is always a part of them. Every race has culture. However, it can have multiple different cultures. The same can be said about every ethnicity. This is why, despite culture being an umbrella term for many things, race and ethnicity are placed above it, so to speak. One could say that culture is generally more important because it is so varied. It is often analyzed everywhere. More often, race and ethnicity can often cause extremely important movements in society, and is a topic that should not be ignored. People are being judged because of their race and ethnicity every day, and this is something that should be stopped in today's age. Culture plays a role there as well, but since we are living in a diverse world, it is important to allow everyone to live the way they want to, as long as they are not hurting others. It does not matter what race or ethnicity or culture they fall under. Now, let me see here. Now, this was from World Atlas, and the name of the article is How is Race Different from Ethnicity and Culture? So if you want to pick this up and get a hold to it, be my guest and read more on it, because there's other links below it that allow you to go into difference. Now, ethnic region. Is Judaism a race or religion? So ethnic religion. In religious studies, let me go ahead. Now this is back to Wikipedia. In religious studies, an ethnic religion is a religion or belief that is associated with a particular ethnic group. Ethnic religions are often distinguished from universal religions such as Christianity or Islam, in which gaining converts is the primary objective, and therefore we are not limited in ethnic, national, or racial scope. Now, I also would have to say that the majority of the time when it comes to Christianity or Islam might be ethnic as well, but Christianity is usually an issue. The overwhelming majority of Christians now, at the time that I'm speaking, has to do with choosing to be a Christian, and I'm going to talk about that Friday when I talk about salvation, how to know whether or not you're saved, and reaffirm your salvation if you have met the requirements. But Christianity is not really necessarily something you're born into. You can't be born into Christianity by virtue of two people coming together and making you and having sex and creating you. You can't be born into it. You have to make a concerted effort to accept what Jesus has died, his death, burial, resurrection. You would have to meet that requirement. It's not something that you can be born into. So the terminology, a number of alternative terms have been used instead of ethnic religion. So another is often used as folk religion. While ethnic religion and folk religion have overlapping uses, the latter term refers to the appropriation of religious beliefs and practices at a popular level. The term folk religion can therefore be used to speak of certain Asian, Chinese, and African religions, but also can refer to popular expressions of more multinational and institutional religions such as folk Christianity or folk Islam. I don't know that you can be a folk Christian. Okay, and I'm going by biblical research. So, In Western contexts, a variety of terms are also employed. In the United States and Canada, a popular alternative term has been nature religion. Some neo-pagan movements, especially in Europe, have adopted ethnic religion as their preferred term, aligning themselves with ethnology. This notably includes the European Congress of Ethnic Religions, which chose its name after a day-long discussion in 1998, where the majority of the participants expressed that pagan contained too many negative connotations, and ethnic rather described the roots of their traditions in particular nations. In the English language popular and scholarly discourse, paganism with a capital P has become an accepted term. So I'm going to come off of here. So the reason why I mention ethnic religion, because now I'm going to go into Judaism itself. So Judaism is an Abrahamic, monotheistic, and ethnic religion comprising the collective religious culture and legal traditions and civilization of the Jewish people. It has its roots as an organized religion in the Middle East during the Bronze Age. Modern Judaism evolved from Yahwism, the religion of ancient Israel and Judah. So let's go into Yahwism. Yahwism is the name given to modern scholars to the religion of ancient Israel. Yahwism was essentially polytheistic with a plethora of gods, I don't know if I would say that, and goddesses. Heading the pantheon was Yahweh. Yahweh is the national god of the Israelite kingdoms of Israel and Judah. With his consort, the goddess Asherah, below them were second tier gods. So let's go back over here. The religion by about 500 BCE, and thus is considered to be one of the oldest monolithic religions. Judaism is considered by religious Jews to be the expression of the covenant that God established with the Israelites and their ancestors. It encompasses a wide body of texts, practices, theological positions, and forms of organizations. The Torah is part of the larger text known as the Hebrew Bible. So I said on here before, during a live, that the Bible for the Jewish people, the Old Testament would be considered their Torah. They call that the Torah because many of them don't have. Some have and some haven't acknowledged that Jesus is Messiah. So because of that, many of them have the Old Testament, which is the Torah, and that would be the creation books, the major and minor prophets, and the celebration of the high holy days. The Torah is the larger part, known as the Hebrew Bible, and its supplemental oral tradition is represented by later texts like the Midrash and the Talmud. Judaism's text, traditions, and values strongly influenced later Abrahamic religions, including Christianity and Islam. Hebraism, like Hellenism, played a seminal part in the formation of Western civilization through its impact as a core background element of early Christianity. So I know, I'm going into that because I know it's going to be some people. So here we go with an article. So this article says DNA links prove that Jews are a race, says genetics expert And this was out of American Enterprise Institute. Now, I recognize that wherever this one is, and when I update it to YouTube, it's going to be I'm going to hear some interesting things. I just know it. And I'm okay. I'm prepared for it. So the article is out of what we said, AEI. And AEI is American Enterprise Institute. So let's look at this. And the article is by John Etting. So, conjuring fear of Nazism and anti-Semitism, Jews recoil from the thought that Judaism might be a race. But medical geneticist Harry Osterer, and if you want to, you can research him and see, and if you want to research him and find something to disagree with, be my guest, because I'm only reading from, articles. Osterer insists that the biological basis of Jewishness cannot be ignored. So in his new book, Legacy, A Genetic History of the Jewish People, Harry Osterer, a medical geneticist and professor at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York, claims that Jews are different, and that the differences are not just skin deep. Jews exhibit, he writes, a distinctive genetic signature. Considering that the Nazis tried to exterminate Jews based on their supposed racial distinctiveness, such a conclusion might be a cause for concern. Yeah. But Oster sees it as central to Jewish identity. Who is a Jew has been a poignant question for Jews throughout our history. It invokes a complex tapestry of Jewish identity made up of different strains of religious beliefs, cultural practices, and blood ties to ancient Palestine and modern Israel. But the question with its echo of genetic determinism also has a dark side. Geneticists have long been aware that certain diseases, from breast cancer to Tay-Sachs, disproportionately affect Jews. Oster, who is also director of genetic and genomic testing at Montefiore Medical Center, goes further, maintaining that Jews are a homogeneous group with all these scientific trappings that we used to call a race. For most of the 3,000-year history of the Jewish people, the notion of what came to be known as Jewish exceptionalism was hardly controversial. Because of our history of intermarriage and cultural isolation imposed or self-selected, Jews were considered by Gentiles and usually referred to themselves as a race. Scholars from Josephus to Disraeli proudly proclaimed their membership in the tribe. And tribe is a term borrowed from the Bible to describe different ethnicities. So Oster explains that how this concept took on special meaning in the 20th century as genetics emerged as a viable scientific enterprise. Now, I find this interesting that I found this article because I can remember during the whole discussion about Whoopi Goldberg, my mother kept saying, if you do a DNA test, it's not going to come back and say that someone is Jewish. Okay, so that's why I pulled up this article, because you have this man saying, but you can prove it, that if you did a DNA test, you can prove that someone has Jewish ethnicity. So, there you have him saying, And we have another one. Can Jewishness be proven with a simple saliva test? So now this article is coming from ynetus.com. And the title of the article is, Can Jewishness be proven with a simple saliva test? So let me see here. So experts on genetics and Jewish law say they have found a Jewish gene that could prove one's Jewish roots. Researchers have been studying mitochondrial DNA, and that one receives only one from his or her mother, which they say could help establish one's connection to Judaism. So this is another one. I'm trying to see who the author of this article is, and I don't see the name of the article, but this article was published May 28, 2017, so it wasn't that long ago. So now you have people stating and let's talk about the Holocaust. Now, let me say this, because I thought about this as I was reading the one article that talks about you can prove your Jewishness through a DNA test. Keep in mind that there are people who use genetics as, how can I say this? Sometimes genetics can be used by people who don't have right motives. And when I say that, I'm saying that because there are people who like to say that they can, let's say the person has white supremacist leanings and they want to or neo-Nazi or whatever, and they want to prove that a person is not white, and it becomes an excuse to discriminate against that group of people, then yeah, all of a sudden you can prove that they aren't, or others. But let me say this, I still am of the mind where with Miss Goldberg that I do believe that it was man's I believe that it was man's inhumanity to man based on race, much like the Holocaust of slavery was against black people, much like apartheid was in South Africa. So I don't believe that Miss Goldberg had any ill intentions when it comes to her statement. I don't think it was ill-intended. I think it was more ill-informed based on a lack of knowledge about Jews or the Jewish faith more than anything. As I look at this, because I'm like, well, that's an interesting question, because I've always thought of them as both an racial ethnicity as well as a religion, just like we looked at this information here. So I'm not going to go into the Holocaust, even though I had the article pulled up. If you want to read about the Holocaust, and because there are different white supremacist sects that have been recently trying to say that the Holocaust never happened. And so I'm like, it did happen. We're not going to go into that. But it is my conclusion after looking at this that I haven't changed my mind. I still see our Jewish brothers and sisters as an ethnicity, as a racial ethnicity, as well as a religion. So it's a combination of both. And so while Whoopi was not, in her assertion was not correct, it wasn't 100% incorrect either. So I am going to go ahead and finish this podcast. I'm, doing my due diligence and creating my content for my ministry, for my media ministry, as well as looking into media ministry. So I'm, recording as well as getting things done. So you guys enjoy as I said this morning on my live Monday morning quarterback, you guys enjoy your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. I will be creating content. If you are following me on any of the 9 platforms that my content is on, I'm also converting my podcast into video form so that they can appear on YouTube. I finally got one of them on YouTube this morning. I'm a happy woman. So I'm going to continue to keep doing that. I'm also working to get my subscribership up and everything. And I look forward to talking to you all, communicating with you all online, wherever I see you and are connected to you. You all have a good one and enjoy the rest of your week. Mwah! This is the sound of me blowing you a kiss to, smooch things over. And I will talk to you later. Bye-bye. Hello, you have reached the message line for Adams Rib Media Ministry. If you would like to give me a shout out, recommend some topics for discussion, or give an opinion about some topics that I've already discussed, either here on my podcast or on my blogs, leave me a message and I will get right back to you. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.